Will you be my girlfriend with the intention of marrying me? That's what everyone I met through a friend wanted to know. One guy, who was 3 years younger than me, said he fell for me right away. I thought about my age and wanting to settle down, so I said yes. A year later, we tied the knot. I'm Michelle, 34 years old, working for a big company. Living overseas has always been my dream. My husband, Paul, is younger than me, but he's a natural leader and takes charge in our relationship. He's the one who leads our household, and I'm okay with that. I've been used to living alone for a while, so I don't mind doing the chores and cooking. Paul doesn't pitch in much, but I don't find it bothersome. When we're out together, Paul always takes the lead, which lets me relax and have fun without any worries. It feels like a nice balance between us. However, everything changed when my mother passed away while I was working. I got a call from my dad, telling me that my mom's illness had gotten worse and she collapsed. I rushed to the hospital, about 2 hours away, to say my final goodbye. I stayed with my dad to help arrange the funeral. When I called Paul, he said he couldn't leave work on short notice. He didn't come to the wake, and although he made it to the funeral, he wasn't dressed appropriately. I had to quickly arrange a suit for him to rent. He complained a lot, saying I should have sorted everything out beforehand. With all the grief and business, I couldn't deal with Paul's complaints, so I brushed them off. But he didn't seem to appreciate that, and he was in a bad mood the whole time. Since then, it seems like our arguments as a couple have been on the rise. It's normal to have some disagreements after being married for 3 years, but lately, Paul's been picking fights more aggressively. His controlling behavior has been overwhelming, often telling me what to do and taking charge. I grew tired of it and tried standing up to him a few times, but since he didn't know how things were managed around the house, even simple tasks like preparing for his business trips became lengthy affairs. Plus, he'd complain while trying to help, only making more of a mess. Eventually, I realized it was easier if I just handled things myself. It wasn't about blindly obeying him. I took charge of certain tasks to save myself the hassle. I'm going to start preparing for us to join the gathering for my mom's first death anniversary next week, I informed Paul. He responded grumpily, "Okay, but I have an important meeting that day. What should I do?" I've mentioned this gathering well in advance. I was taken aback by his sudden remark. "What? You're not going?" Paul sighed heavily. "It's not that, but it'll be tough to delegate everything to my juniors. He seemed pleased with his recent promotion and often talked about his junior team members. I felt like sighing in return. "Please plan for it, okay?" I emphasized. The day before the gathering, when I got home from work, Paul was sulking and drinking beer in the living room. "I'm sorry I'm late." I had to work overtime. I apologized. I could tell he was upset because I was late and dinner was delayed. "I've been waiting here for an hour just as I thought," he grumbled. "But it's just 1 hour, isn't it?" I reasoned. If he couldn't prepare dinner, he could have gone out to buy something. I had informed him of my late arrival time. He could have taken some initiative and handled things on his own. Suppressing the urge to speak my mind, I handed him a takeout box. I thought it'd take too long if I cooked, so I picked this up on my way home instead, I explained. In response, Paul slammed a glass of beer onto the table. "Takeout again? Aren't you slacking off a bit too much lately?" The last time I brought home takeout was about 2 weeks ago. True, I've been busy lately and maybe I haven't been cooking elaborate meals every day. But I always make sure we have a balanced diet and rarely rely on prepackaged items. Still, I didn't think I deserved that kind of criticism. As I debated whether to respond, Paul, misunderstanding something, decided to add insult to injury. "Can't say anything because it's true, huh? Do your chores properly. You've been coming home late lately, claiming you're working overtime. You're probably just out having an affair," Paul shouted. His words ignited a wave of anger that had been simmering inside me. Enough was enough. If you know I'm working late, the least you can do is prepare dinner for us. It's okay if you can't cook. Getting takeout isn't too difficult, is it? I always let you know when I'll be late. And despite being busy, I handle all our household chores. "There's no need for that kind of attitude," I asserted. Paul shot me a glare. "You know what? You're 3 years older than me. I could have married someone in their 20s, but I chose you, an older woman. Show some appreciation and do as I say. No one else would want you, so you'd be in trouble if I left, wouldn't you? Did he really just say that? I was furious and couldn't hold back any longer. Then maybe you should have married a younger woman when we started dating before we got married. I asked if you were okay with me being older, and you said yes. That's why we got married. Even without you, I could manage my life. I retorted. Paul scoffed at my words. Whatever, let's get a divorce. With that, he grabbed his beer and the takeout box and stormed off to his room. We had arguments before, but this was a first. I was done with him. I decided to eat my takeout dinner to calm my nerves, assuming Paul was probably just irritated because he was hungry. But even as I filled my stomach, I couldn't shake off the disbelief that this was all happening the day before my mother's first death anniversary. After a while, I called out to Paul from outside his room, "We need to leave by 8 a.m. tomorrow, so I'll wake you up around 7. There was no response, but I sensed he was awake. With those words said, I went to bed, feeling unsettled. The next morning, when I woke up early, Paul was already gone. The bags I had packed were still in the room, indicating he hadn't left for the gathering without me. Where had he disappeared to? I called his cell, but got no answer. My texts went unanswered too. Left with no other option, I left a voicemail and began getting ready to head out alone. I managed to reach Paul while waiting at the train station. I have to go to my meeting. I can't leave it to my juniors, after all, was all he said before the call abruptly ended. Overwhelmed by a mix of anger and resignation, I found myself in a state of stunned confusion. Before I could process it further, the train arrived, carrying luggage for two, but I boarded alone. When I arrived at my father's house, he anxiously inquired, "Where's Paul?" Seeing my father's sadness since my mother's passing, I didn't want to add to his worries. Taking a deep breath, I forced a smile and replied, "Sorry, he got called into an important meeting. He was supposed to come here, but he recently got a promotion, and it sounded urgent, so I suggested he prioritize that." My father nodded understandingly. "I see. He's working hard. It's a shame I couldn't see him, but your mother would understand. Let him know he's always welcome to visit." Though his words stung a bit, I kept up the smile throughout the day. With no word from Paul, the night passed without any contact from either of us. Planning to stay overnight and return home the next day as originally intended, I felt a bit childish for not reaching out to him. Maybe I'd cook his favorite dish, hamburgers, tomorrow to make amends. With that thought, I went to bed. The next day, after leaving my father's house and arriving home around noon, I decided to drop off my bags before heading to the grocery store. As expected, dirty laundry was strewn around the living room, a sign that Paul still hadn't grasped how to use the washing machine. Sighing, I gathered the laundry and tossed it into the washer along with my own. Taking a break and returning to the living room, something on the table caught my eye. As I got closer, disbelief washed over me. There, sitting on the table, were divorce papers, already signed by Paul. Why? I stared at the papers, bewildered. Was this his way of asking for a divorce? Pulling out my cell phone from my bag, I realized it should be Paul's lunch break. I wasn't sure if Paul would answer, but to my surprise, he picked up on the first ring. "Paul, what's the deal with these divorce papers?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. On the other end, Paul laughed. "What do you mean?" "It's pretty straightforward. I don't want an older wife who won't do her share of household chores. That's why I've decided on a divorce. If we split, I can find someone younger and more appealing. After all, a wife is like a status symbol, isn't she? It's hard to boast about you being older when my colleagues ask. Dodging the topic isn't exactly simple." I was speechless, utterly lost for words. If you don't want a divorce, then start pulling your weight around the house. I'll be home as usual today, so make sure to grab some beer, all right? But if you're set on this, take the divorce papers to the family court. "The ball's in your court," he said before hanging up abruptly. The call left me stunned, unable to utter a single word. It seemed Paul believed his ultimatum would force me to comply. All this time, I'd done the chores not out of fear of him leaving, but because I disliked having to ask him. He likely assumed otherwise, presuming my compliance stemmed from a fear of abandonment, given his dominant nature. Being married to a younger man might draw envy from others, but in reality, there's nothing particularly remarkable about it. I often found myself emphasizing his age, but truth be told, he's quite average in appearance, personality, and income. Describing him as younger was simply convenient. Initially, the age gap concerned me, but now that we're both in our 30s with only a 3-year difference, it feels insignificant. Had the gap been wider, perhaps I feel differently, but constantly being labeled as the older wife when we're essentially peers feels disheartening. I grabbed my bag and made a beeline for the family court. As I handed in the divorce papers, a wave of relief washed over me. Despite thinking we were doing okay, it's clear things are over now. But I can manage without Paul. With that realization, a weight lifted off my shoulders, prompting me to reach out to my boss and request a few days of paid leave. Luckily, work had just eased up, so he granted me about a week off. Now that I'm divorced, it's time to sort out my belongings. Thankfully, I didn't have much to begin with, so tidying up was a breeze. I stashed the larger items in a storage unit, packed my essentials and clothes into the car, and on a whim, decided to head to a hot spring resort. It seemed like the off-season for hotels, so I managed to snag a cheap room on the spot. The thrill of the drive filled me with excitement. As I soaked in the hot springs and lounged in my room, my phone suddenly rang. "Michelle, I asked you to pick up beer, didn't I? Where are you?" I couldn't help but chuckle, recalling Paul's usual routine. "I'm actually at a hot spring resort right now," I replied. "What? A hot spring resort? Why?" Paul's confusion was evident in his voice. "Well, you did say to file the divorce papers if I disagreed with you," I reminded him, amused at the thought of his reaction. "Wait, you actually filed them?" Paul sounded flustered. "Of course I did." "Why? Is something wrong? After all, it was your suggestion." Paul finally regained his composure. "Are you serious? When you say hot spring resort, do you mean some nearby spa? If that's the case, I'll grab dinner, so just come home soon." His sudden caring tone made me laugh even more. "It's about an hour-and-a-half drive. They even have an outdoor natural hot spring. It's quite lovely. I wonder if it'll rain tomorrow. Since you're going out to buy your own dinner, I've already packed up my things so you won't have to worry about me coming back. Please take care of yourself," Paul pleaded desperately, hoping I would reconsider. But I had no intention of returning. "You're the one who initiated the divorce papers, remember." It was clear he was using the threat of divorce to manipulate me. "I've already told you I can manage without you. Now that you've divorced your older wife, you can find someone younger. Whether you succeed or not is up to you." Paul fell silent. "It might not be my place, but you should consider moving out of that apartment," I continued. Finally, Paul spoke up again. "Why should I?" His voice was barely audible. "Think about your finances. You'll end up broke if you keep living there. You can't handle chores, cooking, or laundry. You'll need to hire help and eat out, right? That's costly. It would be problematic if most of your salary went toward rent. You always thought you were the one providing for me, but my salary is nearly double yours. You've never been the provider. If anything, it's been the opposite. And that confidence you had because of that one junior. I have multiple juniors under me and even more under them. I usually keep work talk to myself because Paul gets moody, but I outrank him both in position and salary. You'd think he'd have noticed by now, living together and all, but it seems like it's news to him. Maybe Paul, being the proud, dominant man he is, kept his ego intact by looking down on me. Now that he can't, he must be feeling quite defeated. I've dealt a blow to this pride, payback for all these years. As for why I handled the household chores without complaint, even when you acted domineering, it was partly because you were younger and I cut you some slack, and partly because it was too much hassle to ask anything of you. I didn't need you to stay with me. I was just handling your needs alongside my own chores. So when you said, do the chores or we divorce, it was an easy choice. We're strangers now. Goodbye. I said my piece and hung up the phone. Feeling rejuvenated, I savored the hotel's cuisine. As anticipated, Paul reached out for reconciliation, but I responded with a smile. I'm older than you. I doubt you want me back. Apparently, he hadn't fared well with younger women. Eventually, Paul gave up and moved out of the apartment. Engaging a lawyer for asset division, I demanded more to compensate for the burden of household chores I had endured. Paul, being thrifty, didn't hire legal representation, giving me the upper hand. With my lawyer's assistance, we negotiated an agreement with favorable terms for me. Interestingly, it appears Paul's lone junior had been vocal about his poor leadership skills, to the extent that he couldn't even consider him a competent boss. Paul caught wind of this, and they are now embroiled in a dispute. He should have realized the importance of nurturing his own team. As for me, I had been offered a position at our overseas headquarters. Initially hesitant due to the circumstances and out of consideration for Paul, I finally decided to seize the opportunity. I'm currently gearing up for the transition. Though I've caused my father some concern, we've begun practicing video calls to stay connected when I'm abroad. I'm thrilled to pursue the career I've dreamed of since childhood. It's time to give it my all.
Here's a gift for your wedding. Enjoy it with our son, said Mary, my mother-in-law, as she handed me a teddy bear. It was cute, but I couldn't fully appreciate it. Mary and I hadn't been getting along, so her sudden kindness was confusing. I met Tom at our gym when he kindly helped me with a tricky machine. We hit it off and soon started dating. A year later, on my birthday, he proposed. Married life with Tom has been great, but I've had some worries, especially about my relationship with his mom, Mary. When we visited his family's mansion, I was surprised by their wealth. Tom, however, is down to earth and not into extravagant spending, which I admire. My dad always stresses the importance of financial independence, so Tom's frugal mindset resonated with me. But when I finally met my in-laws, Mary seemed to dislike me from the start. She made a hurtful comment about my work as a remote worker, implying I just play on the computer all day. It stung, despite my efforts to work hard and be responsible. Childhood friend love stories sound nice, but maybe they're not so common in reality. Since Mary's mood didn't improve, we decided it was best to leave. On our way home, Tom kept apologizing to me. I'm really sorry about my mom. She's been upset about Emily and took it out on you. I'll talk to my dad about it later. Mary's behavior made me question if marrying Tom was the right choice. But I still loved him and wasn't ready to give up easily. I made a secret vow to prove Mary wrong. After our wedding, John suggested we move into a guest house on their property. It's been empty for years, he explained. As you get older, it's easy to lose touch with friends. We'd love to have you nearby. Feeling uneasy, I called my mom and showed her the teddy bear. She immediately told me to get rid of it. Shocked by my mom's reaction, I hurried to the police station. My name is Sarah. I'm 28, and I work from home. I've been happily married to Tom for a year, though we don't have kids yet. I met Tom at our gym when he kindly helped me with a tricky machine. We hit it off and soon started dating. A year later, on my birthday, he proposed. Married life with Tom has been great, but I've had some worries, especially about my relationship with his mom, Mary. When we visited his family's mansion, I was surprised by their wealth. Tom, however, is down to earth and not into extravagant spending, which I admire. My dad always stresses the importance of financial independence, so Tom's frugal mindset resonated with me. But when I finally met my in-laws, Mary seemed to dislike me from the start. She made a hurtful comment about my work as a remote worker, implying I just play on the computer all day. It stung despite my efforts to work hard and be responsible. Childhood friend love stories sound nice, but maybe they're not so common in reality. Since Mary's mood didn't improve, we decided it was best to leave. On our way home, Tom kept apologizing to me. I'm really sorry about my mom. She's been upset about Emily and took it out on you. I'll talk to my dad about it later. Mary's behavior made me question if marrying Tom was the right choice. But I still loved him and wasn't ready to give up easily. I made a secret vow to prove Mary wrong. After our wedding, John suggested we move into a guest house on their property. It's been empty for years, he explained. As you get older, it's easy to lose touch with friends. We'd love to have you nearby. The guest house was spotless and roomy, much cozier than your average home, even though it had been vacant for years. After talking it over with Tom, I accepted his dad's kind offer, but this decision brought its own set of problems. Mary, who lived nearby, started dropping by uninvited and picking at everything. She'd nitpick about the cleanliness of the house or criticize my cooking. She even belittled my remote work, saying it wasn't real work and comparing me unfavorably to Emily, Tom's ex, who apparently excelled at everything domestic. These comments always seemed to come when Tom wasn't around. At first, I tried to defend myself, but Mary was expert at twisting my words, leaving me frustrated. Eventually, I realized engaging with her only stressed me out more. So I started brushing off her remarks and letting them slide. This seemed to annoy her even more, so she began resorting to more direct forms of harassment, like hiding community newsletters from me and withholding messages from neighbors. Her actions caused me to miss important community events, which landed me in trouble. One day, as I was folding laundry, she purposely messed it up or handled it with dirty hands, leaving stains. She'd help herself to food from my fridge without asking and even opened packages I'd ordered online, criticizing me for being wasteful. When her actions started causing actual damage, I reached my breaking point. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I decided to confront Mary directly. Enough is enough, Mary. Even if you have issues because of Emily, this is going too far. Why do you keep harassing me like this? I stood firm, arms crossed, ready to confront her. Mary seemed surprised by my determination and quickly fired back. I faced challenges as a new bride too, but I never complained to my in-laws like you do. You're quite headstrong. Once you marry into a family, shouldn't you serve and respect your husband's parents? That's how it used to be. You think it's all right to treat me this way just because you went through it as a bride? I asked, stunned. Mary's response was chillingly firm. Yes, I do, and I won't stop. I can't accept someone like you as Tom's wife. If you don't like it, just divorce him and leave. Mary's words left me speechless with disbelief. It was clear that reasoning with her was futile. I didn't want to burden Tom, but it seemed I had no other option. When I finally opened up to him about his mother's behavior, he was distressed. What is my mother thinking? I've told her countless times not to bother you, and now she's dragging the neighbors into it. Bad-mouthing is one thing, but it's unacceptable when she starts interfering with our daily lives. I'm sorry you have to deal with this. I'll have a serious talk with her. That night, Tom confronted Mary at our home. Despite her tearful protests, he stood his ground. Enough is enough. If this happens again, I won't forgive you. Thankfully, Mary stopped coming over for a while, giving us some much-needed peace. But it didn't last long. A week later, just when I thought things were settling down, the doorbell rang, and there stood Mary, wearing a wide smile. She was holding a cute teddy bear for some reason, and I couldn't quite figure out why. I thought, puzzled by the situation. Mary, what brings you here today? I asked. She seemed meek and apologetic as she responded, I'm sorry for everything. Tom scolding me made me realize how childish I was being, taking out my frustrations about Emily on you. I accepted her apology, albeit with confusion. Well, I'm glad you understand. Actually, I came to apologize properly. I realized I never gave you a proper wedding gift, so I thought this teddy bear would be nice. Isn't it cute? I wish you and Tom happiness, she said, offering me the bear. Though I thanked her, the gift didn't make much sense to me. I'm not particularly fond of teddy bears or stuffed animals in general. For a wedding gift, something practical like kitchenware or appliances would have been more appropriate, especially considering our recent conflicts. Could there be a hidden motive behind this gesture? Feeling uneasy, I decided to consult my mom, who lived nearby. I've confided in her about Mary's harassment before. When I showed her the teddy bear, her usually calm face lit up suddenly. Sarah, your dad brought some sweets as a souvenir. Let's put the teddy bear in the living room and have some coffee first. Help me get things ready, my mom said, her behavior seeming strange. Despite my unease, I went to the kitchen. As soon as I entered, my mom grabbed my shoulder with a serious expression. You need to get rid of that thing quickly. Otherwise, something terrible will happen. What? Why the sudden urgency? Is there something wrong with the teddy bear? I asked, confused. Calm down and listen. That stuffed animal is. After hearing her explanation, I was speechless at Mary's outrageous behavior. But at the same time, I ran out of patience. I understand now. Then I need to return the gesture, I said, placing the teddy bear in the living room and waiting for Tom to come home. When he saw it, he asked, "Isn't it cute? Did you buy this? Welcome home." "No, this is a wedding gift from your mother," I replied. "From Mom? Why would she give a teddy bear?" Tom asked, puzzled. I pulled him aside to explain the situation and asked for his help with my plan. He nodded in agreement. A few hours later, Tom and I found ourselves in a heated argument. "You preferred Emily because she was nicer, just like your mom said. That's why you wanted to marry her," I accused him. "I never said that. You're reading too much into it," Tom retorted, the argument escalating into harsh words. "That's it. Marrying someone like you was a mistake. Let's get divorced right now," he declared. And just as he said that, Mary burst into our house. She stood at the doorway with a broad smile plastered on her face. "Tom, you finally see the truth. She's the worst wife, strong-willed, not cute at all, and so presumptuous. I always knew she wasn't right for you. Divorce her immediately and kick her out of this house." Mary's delight quickly turned to confusion. Tom and I, who moments ago were supposedly locked in a fierce argument, now shared a cold gaze as we stared back at her. I addressed her slowly. "You noticed we were fighting, didn't you?" Mary stumbled in her response, attempting to cover up her timing to enter our home. It was just a hunch. I just felt it," she quickly defended, but her shifting eyes betrayed her. "Don't lie. Tell the truth. You rigged a teddy bear with a surveillance camera and a bug, didn't you?" I accused, revealing what my mom had noticed and told me about when I returned home. She had suspected something when she heard about Mary's gift, recalling a similar crime reported on the news involving a woman being spied on through a stuffed animal. Mary's expression froze in realization. On my way back, I went to the police station to report this. "They should be arriving any minute now," I continued, watching as panic flickered across Mary's face. "That's ridiculous. Don't joke about this. Calling the police over such a thing is an overreaction. Call them back and cancel it right now," she pleaded desperately. "Planting cameras and listening devices in someone's home is a serious crime. It's your fault. You were so insolent that I felt I had to find something to hold over you. You are an outrageous woman." Mary tried to shift the blame, lashing out in anger. Tom finally reached his breaking point with his mother. "Enough is enough. I've never been more ashamed to call you my mother. Mom, I thought you regretted mistreating Sarah, but then you pull something like this. Please don't be angry, Tom. I was doing it for you," Mary tried to explain. "So committing a crime is justified. I shouldn't have been lenient just because you're my mother. I'm going to report this to Dad, and I'm cutting ties with you. Stay away from Sarah and me," Tom declared firmly. Mary began to scream, attempting to apologize through tears. Tom halted her. "You're apologizing to the wrong person," he said, turning to me. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I felt like I was losing Tom to you and made a foolish mistake. I deeply regret it. I won't oppose you again. Please forgive me," she pleaded desperately. But after everything she put me through, including the disturbing teddy bear incident, forgiveness was out of the question. "I will never forgive you. I reached out to you multiple times and you ruined it. How could I forgive being given such a disgusting gift? Sorry might work for children, but as adults we must face the consequences of our actions," I told her firmly. Despite her continued pleas, neither Tom nor I felt any sympathy. Later the police arrived, giving her a stern warning. Weeks later, John divorced her and kicked her out of the house. Apparently, he had long been frustrated with her reckless spending. Combined with her mistreatment of me and the teddy bear incident, he had had enough. Now she lives in a run-down apartment, struggling with multiple part-time jobs, a consequence of her actions. I hope she uses this opportunity to reconsider her choices and change for the better. As for me, I'm grateful to live in peace, surrounded by the kindness of Tom and John. In just a few months, we'll be welcoming our long-awaited baby into the world. We're filled with anticipation for the day our little one arrives. Hi, I'm Mia. I'm 29 years old, and I recently went through a divorce from my husband Fred a few months ago. Fred and I first met in college, where we shared a few classes and often sat together. We hit it off and soon found ourselves falling in love. However, there was a challenge in our relationship. Fred's mother, Holly, She seemed to dislike me for some unknown reason and made efforts to come between Fred and me. I used to talk to Fred about how uncomfortable his mother's behavior made me, but he never took any action. He found it hard to stand up to her because she was all he had while growing up. So I decided to let it slide and endure her constant criticism. She loved finding fault in everything I did, even things she didn't know about. I suspected Fred was sharing details with her, which only fueled our arguments. After a lot of fighting, Fred agreed to stop sharing personal information about me with his mother. We dated for around 3 years before tying the knot. Despite Holly's attempts to sway Fred, our bond remained strong. We distanced ourselves from her for a while. During that period, both of us scored promotions at work. Although I earned slightly more, we divided our expenses 60/40, with me covering the larger share. While our relationship flourished, I felt the need to pursue a hobby for personal fulfillment. Design had always intrigued me, so I decided to explore graphic design, something I could do from home. Without Fred's knowledge, I invested in courses and equipment, keeping my project a secret. I preferred keeping my ventures private as not all of them panned out. The only person I confided in was my best friend Jess. I've picked up a new interest. Another one of your hobbies you'll ditch soon. I hope not. I aim to make good money from it. Really? Finally getting paid for a hobby? Yes, actually, I'm delving into graphic design. Great choice. It's a lucrative field. I've taken some courses and want to start freelancing. I might start a business. Starting solo might not be my style. I was thinking of joining a firm. Nah, that's too routine for you. I have friends starting businesses. You could design their logos and websites. That sounds fantastic. The people Jess introduced me to were wealthy risk-takers willing to invest in a beginner like me. Despite my lack of experience, they appreciated my work and connected me with more clients. Gradually, my side hustle became a significant source of income, easing our financial strain. I started saving to surprise Fred with something special, but whenever I wanted to discuss it, he seemed distant. His behavior raised concerns, but he avoided discussing it. The first sign of trouble was when he confessed to spending all his earnings on investments soon after payday. We argued, but we managed to navigate through that month. I worked extra hours to make ends meet, hoping things would improve. But the following month, Fred repeated the same mistake, leaving me furious. How could he squander his money so recklessly? I lashed out in frustration, later regretting my harsh words. I hoped it would prompt him to be more responsible. Yet when it happened again the next month, I felt drained. Despite my efforts, Fred's financial habits persisted. My graphic design gig became our main source of income. But when Fred couldn't contribute for the third month in a row, I reached my breaking point. How could you let this happen again? Haven't you learned anything? I'm just trying to maximize returns, but I messed up. Messed up. Losing your entire paycheck isn't a small mistake. You've got your money though, right? We'll handle things as usual. No, I'm done. I won't cover for you this month. Figure out your own expenses. What? You can't do that. And you can't gamble away everything you earn. But here we are. So what? I'm supposed to go hungry and take public transport. We'll have food at home, but you'll have to use public transport since you can't pay for gas. So you want me to look poor? Taking public transport doesn't define your status. Stop acting entitled. If you wanted to drive, maybe you should have thought about your gambling habits. You're selfish and heartless. How could you do this to your husband? What about what you're doing to me? I've been working extra hours to cover for your losses. Can't you see things from my perspective? You have no perspective worth considering. I'm out. I can't deal with you right now. After Fred stormed off, I couldn't understand his behavior. It was then I started suspecting Holly's involvement. While Fred was away, I decided to investigate. Since he had logged into his bank account on my laptop and saved the password, it wasn't hard to access it. To my surprise, he had plenty of money in his account, and his transactions seemed normal. I was puzzled. Why was he hiding money from me? Why the lies? Feeling confused, I checked his messages for answers. The first person I noticed he had texted was his mom, discussing our recent argument. He told her I'd lashed out because he wouldn't give me money, and Holly responded with an "I told you so." It confirmed my suspicions that she was influencing him. She'd always harbored animosity toward me, but I didn't realize the extent of it until now. As I scrolled through their messages, I discovered more. Holly had bombarded Fred with texts about me, highlighting my supposed flaws like being money-driven and only with him for his wealth. Ironically, I was the main breadwinner in our household. It was clear she was getting to Fred. He started texting her about trivial things that annoyed him about me, and she only fueled his complaints. It explained why Fred was growing distant. Eventually, they plotted to cut me off financially. Initially, Fred resisted, but Holly's encouragement wore him down. 2 months ago, he went through with it. He informed Holly about my extra work hours 1 month and our subsequent argument the next, which only worsened things. I was devastated by what I discovered. Unsure of what to do, I sought solace at my best friend Jess's house. She's always been my go-to person in tough times, no matter the hour. Showing up unannounced at 11:30 p.m. understandably alarmed her. After letting me in and settling me with a glass of wine, she asked what had happened. So spill the beans. What's got you so worked up? I've just uncovered some unsettling things, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Oh, is this about Holly and Fred? Yeah. You remember how Fred's been throwing away his money on those sketchy investments for the past couple of months? Yeah, it was bizarre. Did he do it again? Yes and no. What do you mean? He's had his money all along but refused to give me any. What? That makes no sense. You've been shouldering most of the household expenses, right? Exactly. That's what's so baffling about his behavior. Is Holly pulling the strings in this? Of course. She's been texting him about my flaws for a while and even persuaded him to stop supporting me. And she's clueless about your income too. But what about Fred? Shouldn't he realize how much you contribute? Apparently not. I'm not sure how to handle this. It's pretty obvious though, right? Cut off this support, then divorce him when he's down. Isn't that a bit harsh, Mia? He didn't think about that. Why are you worried? You know what? You're exhausted. Sleep on it, and we'll talk more tomorrow. Jess was spot on. I was utterly drained, both mentally and physically. The events of the day had taken their toll, and all I craved was sleep. Luckily, it was the weekend the next day. Jess and I put on one of our favorite movies, and soon we drifted off. The following morning, we decided to escape from our troubles and indulge in a day of relaxation. We stayed in bed, binge-watching movies and shows, cooking delicious meals, and cherishing each other's company. Despite my efforts to push away thoughts of the previous day, they lingered. I knew I needed this time to process everything. However, that evening my phone rang. Seeing Holly's name on the caller ID made my heart race. Unsure whether to answer, Jess encouraged me to take the call. With trembling hands, I answered. Hello, Holly. You're despicable. Whoa, hold on. What's this about? You're just after my son's money, aren't you? Excuse me? Is that why you cut off his expenses? No, he's been squandering his money on those foolish investments. I can't keep supporting his reckless behavior. Well, that was all a test. A test. I wanted to show Fred that you're only with him for his wealth, and you proved my point. Don't you think you've crossed a line meddling in our marriage? Who are you to judge me when you're the one chasing wealth? Fine. I don't want my son's marriage to fail. What do you suggest we do to fix things? I want you and Fred to split everything 50-50ths. Everything. Are you serious? Yes. Let's see how long you can handle it. I'll draft a contract for both of you. Once signed, you must stick to it. Fine. If Fred agrees, we'll do it. I want a copy of that contract. Agreed. We'll discuss further on Tuesday. I couldn't believe this was the state of my marriage, and anger surged within me. How dare Holly accuse me of being a gold digger, and how could Fred tolerate it? I'd supported him through everything, even his mistakes and lies. When I shared the call with Jess, she smiled, helping me see the silver lining. Splitting everything evenly meant Fred would have to shoulder his share of our major expenses. He had no idea about my side hustle, which I kept secret until it gained momentum. I wanted to surprise him with its success and buy him something extravagant. Knowing I had a solid backup plan brought me relief in that moment. Tuesday arrived sooner than expected. Jess joined me after we finished work, eager to witness the unfolding events. Upon our return home, we found Holly and Fred already there. Fred was preoccupied with his phone, while Holly sat with the lawyer, tweaking what seemed to be the contract on his laptop. Holly barely acknowledged me, but Fred looked visibly nervous. He tried to signal for us to talk privately in the kitchen, but I brushed him off. Instead, I approached Holly and requested to review the contract. The lawyer obliged, and as I suspected, it outlined an equal split of everything, with the added clause of no financial assistance between us. I agreed and signed the document. It didn't take long before Fred began facing challenges. At first, Fred and I kept our distance, both unwilling to engage with someone who seemed intent on my suffering. But when you share a living space, avoiding conversation is nearly impossible. Fred made efforts to bridge the gap between us, but I initially brushed him off. Eventually, his persistence wore me down, and I reluctantly started talking to him. "Can we please talk? This silent treatment is getting us nowhere." "What exactly do you want me to say, Fred?" "I don't know, but I miss us." "Do you? Then why agree to a contract dividing our finances?" "I wanted to see if you were truly invested in our relationship. Your mother has caused so many issues between us, yet you still believe her. Is this really the best solution?" "Don't speak ill of my mother. And what money do you think I need from you?" "Look, I don't want confrontation. I'm trying to mend things. There won't be any progress until that contract is gone. It's only been 2 weeks since we signed it. I have yet to see any proof that you're not just in it for the money." "You're impossible, you know that?" "Listen, if you're struggling financially, tell me. I'll help. But wouldn't that violate the contract? Besides, I don't want to be accused of breaking it." "Why are you making this so hard? You're the one who created this mess. Can't we just be civil?" "Fine." I could see Fred wrestling with conflicting influences, the beliefs instilled by Holly versus his original values. The Fred I married would never have made such foolish decisions that could harm me. Yet, here he was, obedient to every word from his mother, a decision he'd come to regret. Thankfully, I'd already paid off our major loans that month, leaving Fred in a bind the following month. With my shares settled, I enjoyed financial freedom. I indulged in splurges, treating myself and Jess to lavish dinners, fine wines, museum visits, and cozy cafes, documenting our adventures on social media. Despite inviting Fred to join us multiple times, he always declined due to his financial struggles. Meanwhile, my graphic design side hustle flourished, allowing me to reduce my hours at my day job and even contemplate quitting altogether. Fred's difficulties were evident, even in our groceries. His side of the pantry and fridge often remained empty. While part of me felt sympathy, I couldn't forget that he brought this upon himself. Later, Holly showed up at our doorstep. Jess and I had just returned, so her presence caught me off guard. "Hey Holly, what brings you here?" "Don't act innocent. I know what you've been up to, and I'm calling the cops." "Pardon me? What are you talking about?" "You've been robbing Fred, haven't you?" "Why on earth would I do that?" "Because you're seeking revenge. You're not happy about that contract he made you sign. My poor son has been struggling all month while you're out living it up on his dime. Firstly, your son doesn't have any money for me to steal. Yes, I despise the contract, but let's not forget who's truly responsible for it. You're the one who pressured us into signing it, and now your son is suffering because of it, you liar. I'll be dialing the police right now." "Go ahead. I haven't taken a penny from your son." "How do you have so much money then? Your job doesn't pay that much more than Fred's, and he mentioned you've cut back on hours." "I have another business on the side, a graphic design venture. I intended to surprise Fred with it until you filled his head with nonsense. You started a business without telling me. I plan to buy you a car with the money I earned. How much do you make from it?" "More than you think. You lied. I didn't do anything wrong. I was trying to do something nice, and you ruined it. Since you care so much about your son, maybe you should support him." I handed divorce papers to Fred, which I filed right after signing the contract and kept until now. Fred looked shocked, but I was indifferent. While Holly would normally rejoice at the sight of the papers, she seemed furious instead. I informed them I'd be moving out in 3 weeks and would continue to split the remaining loan payments, but that was all. Fred pleaded with me, but I reminded him it was his doing. It's been a few months since everything unfolded, and I can happily say I'm free from that toxic relationship. Holly tried to contest the divorce, but with our assets separated by the contract, there was little for Fred to gain. In fact, he ended up losing more money, struggling to keep up with the mortgage payments. We sold the house, and he moved back in with his mother. Meanwhile, my life has taken a positive turn. My business is thriving, and I've had the opportunity to collaborate with major brands. It's been a blissful and fulfilling time for me. I'm grateful I had something to rely on, or I might have ended up in Fred's situation. I hope he learns from this experience, but ultimately, it's not my concern.